Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. That is Nate Bauer. Sean Fitz is a very important person and had a very important phone call, so he will be joining us in just a little bit. I've always said he's the Adam Schefter of the group where he's just getting news or texting Nate. One of the two things is happening.
Let's not get carried away here, T. Frank.
Listen, Nate, it's all about salesmanship. Just go with me.
No, you're right. You're right. No, this is incredible stuff.
We are the most plugged-in people in Penn State football, and all the news flows through Fitz.
I mean, I guess that's true.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I won't, what did Franklin say last night? I won't fight a win. I won't apologize for a win. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about those comments on today's show. Nate is our preeminent James Franklin whisperer, and there was some not-so-subtle reading between the lines last night. And then some conversation just generally about what he had to say and about practice. We'll be getting to all of that. But, Nate, please, off the top, thoughts about practice last night or about the game upcoming this weekend? Take your pick. What do you want to talk about to start the show?
Yeah, we can start with practice. I looked at the offense. I think you did mostly too, right? So certainly we're paying attention to Trey Wallace, right? Yep. Who was seen on the sideline, left the game in the first half, and in the second half was seen without his pads or jersey, standing on the sideline with a sling over his right arm. I
believe that's correct.
I want to say his right arm. So I'm sure of it. It's his right arm. So he was not there. We did not see him out with that group of receivers last night. Between Wednesday and James Franklin's comments on Tuesday about having I believe he said no additional information about Trey.
Right. That's his way of saying not season ending and stop asking.
Correct. But we're gonna read through the hieroglyphics here and guess that his situation is tenuous at best going into this weekend.
Yeah, not great.
Just not great. Not great. And we can talk about the implications of that in a minute. The second guy, obviously, that we were looking for was Caden Wallace, who also left the game in the first half. I believe did not play at all in the second half. He was back, actually. He was out there practicing. To what extent he participated, right? I mean, sometimes they have guys out there that literally it's just like they put the uniform on and to throw everyone off the scent, which is fine. I get that. I get all of that.
Let's also preface that last night was Haluba Hall, so there are certain limitations to what we can and can't see up close because of the way everything is structured. The offense is in front of us, and they have about half the field, maybe a third of the field, and the offensive skill players work on the sideline. We're allowed access to. The offensive and defensive lines are on the far sideline, so if you've got a telescope, if you've got spy glasses, or if you have just a really nice camera, which I have just an okay camera, you can see to the other side of the field. But otherwise, eyeballs, it's 58, 60 yards away. So there's less information from Haluba Hall nights than there are from other nights.
100%. We'll refer to the 53 and a third, right? 53 and a third plus
the sideline. Yep.
Correct. So there's a lot of, I mean, it very well could be another person in a 73 jersey that you just, right. But in any case, he was out there and looked okay. And combining that with what Franklin said on Tuesday about him not expecting, again, I'm paraphrasing here, but not expecting it to be an issue for Caden against Maryland. I think that gives you a fairly good sense of where they stand, except for the fact that they appeared to have really three right tackles, right? I think that's a fair way to describe it. And again, we're watching 5-10 minutes of this, but not only was Drew Shelton over there, but Javin Williams was getting some work on the right side as well.
That's been a trend, I want to say, the last 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, that we've seen, where we saw him intensively get a lot, especially early in the season, get a lot of instruction at left tackle from Phil Troutwine. Now, I think with the situation and just generally they want to build some depth there and flexibility at their swing tackle position. So at this point in the year, get Javin some reps at right tackle, break glass in case of emergency.
Yep.
He seems to be the guy for left tackle in the future, but at the same time, Drew Shelton's ahead of him, so if you want to get your best players on the field, at some point he has to get some exposure to right tackle. But there was so much building to do from a basic standpoint that it makes sense they started him at the left side where he was comfortable and working previously.
Yeah, exactly. So, so those were really the two situations for us to look out for. On top of that, obviously there are ramifications to Trey Wallace not being out there. Of which, you had Keandre with Dante Cephas, and Dante Cephas started a couple of games. I know Franklin said that he started the Ohio State game, but
so in terms of to read between the lines and give you a little more specificity about that, he is now officially one of the receivers in the 11 personnel package. So if you were to say the two starting receivers, Trey Wallace and Keandre Lambert-Smith, but when you go into 11 personnel, instead of another receiver, Keandre going out to the boundary and bringing in a slot, they officially had Cephas a part of the starting lineup against Ohio State, which I believe was a first for him, but I can't be entirely sure.
So I think I looked back at it last night. He actually had two starts. I want to say against Iowa and the next game Northwestern, maybe. Okay. So, the undercutting point is he only played like 12 reps in that Ohio State game. So, it's not okay. Technically, maybe he did start, but it wasn't as though he saw extensive action until last week after Trey went out. So, So Cephas has by every indication that we can see has moved his way into that starting group. And then also, I think, as you noted, it bumps everybody up, right? It's not just Cephas that is impacted by Trey not being there. It's now the next best option for you is Liam Clifford again in the slot, and what that means for Keandre Lambert-Smith.
Yeah. So we'll get to all of that in just 1 second. We'll get into our full practice review. We've done a good bit of the offense. Like a couple other things we can talk about on the offensive side. Fitz will join us in just one moment for the defensive side. But right now I need to tell you about Caldera Lab, because you don't get to look like this by accident. Everything in my life is intentional or unintentionally excellent. And I've been very lucky to fall into Caldera Labs. Their skin rejuvenation process, these are male skincare products, which is a thing, guys. Here's the shocker, Nate. Skin doesn't have a gender. You have to take care of it the same way. The difference is this does not have first off, it doesn't have any awful products in it. These are all incredibly healthy, good products for you. There's not a whole lot of additives and preservatives, but also it's designed for men, so we, as fragile egoed men as we are, don't feel weird about using feminine products. So they're very, very nice. The beard, it's not just the sunlight coming through my window or the silver in my beard that's making it look good and shiny today. It is the conditioning oil, which is only for external use, Nate. I should remind you that this is only for external use. But these are awesome products. I love using the Caldera Lab products. 20% off with promo code BWI23. You go to calderalab.com, use the promo code BWI23 to get 20% off, which is an awesome deal. And you can look great for fall. I was so excited. I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago when the term lumbersexual became a thing. That's the vibe I've had to go for my whole life with this face. So Caldera Lab helping me achieve all of that. Use promo code BWI for 20% off. I'm so glad that Fitz is in the waiting room, so he can't. We don't have to see his face as I say the term lumbersexual. But let's get into Penn State practice highlights. Nate, you were going to say something?
Yeah, it's the urban lumberjack. It's you messed up what it's called. It's also stunning. It is stunning to me that our sponsors are skincare products and not like chips or beer. So those would feel more appropriate. But love it that Caldera Labs is helping us out and doing the sponsorship with the show.
Hi, Fitz.
Hey, buddy.
How you doing?
Kind of speechless, if you're asking. No, I'm
That's what I
great. I
go
would have been
for.
on here on time, but I was shaving with my Caldera Lab products, and I was just staring
There
at
you
myself in
go.
the mirror for the last 10 minutes. So it's great. No, but we do appreciate them. And I actually was getting ready with my Caldera Lab products, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here with Nate. Happy to be here with you. Happy to talk about Penn State's defense because that's what I was watching at practice last night.
Yeah, availability is one thing. We can get to that in a second. By the way, check out all of their information, all of their insights over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Their articles last night give you all the details of their notebooks, their observations. But what were your general observations to start us off with the defensive side of the ball?
I mean, they look loose. They look like a team that had a step back against Indiana. I don't think there's any question that it was probably their loosest game in terms of communication. Obviously, the big breakdown that everybody looks at, but there were a couple of ones going out through the game where they had some communication issues. So Manny Diaz trying to button those things up because Maryland could, they've got talent in spots. This is kind of always the Maryland thing. They have talent in certain spots, and they've got a quarterback that can throw the ball, some receivers that can get some separation, and obviously, communication going to be key and keeping them down. But yeah, I mean, you look around, and obviously availability is the number one thing that you take into account when you go into the brief time. And I had you guys on before I came on. Can't believe you didn't make a Michigan joke about trying to see all the way across the field. That was pretty low-hanging fruit, and you guys either avoided it on purpose, or I'm not sure. But no Chop Robinson, not a big surprise. It's one of those things where you're hoping to get him back, but given the nature of the injury, like you don't know a timeline because there is no set timeline on those things. But we did see Amin Vanover back. He, of course, dressed and warmed up on Saturday, did not play. I think he's probably mostly there. I wouldn't label him as fully back, but he was going through and doing some reps and doing some things that seems to be on the right track. Again, watching that injury, getting him back at all is great because that when the knee goes the wrong way, that's nobody likes that. But to get him back, I think is a big deal. Penn State relied heavily on Adisa Isaac and denied Dennis Sutton last week. Deny was very good. But you obviously want to have as much depth as possible in front of Jordan Lyons. Of course, Zariah Fisher has played as well. So getting him back at a spot where you're only looking at playing five guys essentially, plus the freshman. I mean, any body in there is going to help. So no Chop, yes to Adisa. I would say yes mostly to Adisa, and that's kind of where you're at with that. No Elliott Washington, which he was out for the game the other day, and that's certainly one to watch. But that's more of a special teams equation there for Elliott Washington.
Couple things here in the chat. Stephen Light back as always. He says, thanks for putting up with us, guys. The reason we do this, thank you, Stephen, for being here. And then we have M. Shive 2. Mike is back. He says, for your efforts, I always appreciate you being here. He says, finally able to be here live doing expense reports. So he's listening to us while doing something very repetitive and monotonous. Something that I need to remind everybody of, if you are watching a video, you're enjoying getting insights and hearing terms like lumbersexual being thrown around casually, please like the video and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated because I am an unhinged person that will not be contained. So there will be more of that in the future. I promise you that. One of the things I noticed that I wanted to get to today from an offensive perspective of what Penn State did is actually, Nate, we saw a new drill. We don't usually get to see new drills, so I don't know if this is a new drill to Penn State or if this is just a new one they have different in the rotation, but we see them go through tackle breaking drills where they have a certain circuit and they've got a helmet on a stick they've got to punch away, but here they're doing dynamic tackle breaking. So James Franklin, by the way, looked like he was super into swinging that bag. He was having a great time. But generally, I like this idea of if you're struggling, and Penn State has generally been struggling to break some tackles this year, switch things up because some of the stuff that they're doing, maybe guys are getting used to it and it's not progressing them as much. So the idea of not being able to predict where and when they're supposed to stiff arm and where and when they're supposed to tuck the ball and where they're supposed to throw the shoulder, doing something different, I just thought was a creative and a good way to enhance the offense and break things up as we enter November for the Penn State football team during practice. We good on practice? You want to talk about James Franklin? Last night, extended conversation about off the field things, Nate. Do you want to start with that? We've got we're going to save that for a little bit later because that is part of the mailbag. What are your thoughts on the stuff that James Franklin didn't want to talk about that he did talk about last night?
the stuff that he didn't want to talk about, but
I mean, saving that. I just gave you word salad. Other than the
Okay.
stuff at the end, what stood out to you?
I don't know, Fitz, you chime in first. I have to recollect my memory on exactly what he said last night.
I did appreciate his interaction with T. Frank, asking about turnovers being predictable. Sorry, and he said he wishes he could predict it. But I mean, it's a relevant point because Maryland has been susceptible, especially in the last 3 games, to turnovers. They had 2 picks against Ohio State, 1 last weekend, gave up 6 sacks, so that's going to open up the door for a strip sack or something like that. So Maryland hasn't protected the football all that well in the last couple of weeks. But I saw the hamster running up there, and I see your thought process because Penn State has been able to dictate a lot of things, but turnovers are there's a huge element of randomness to that. But I think what you're getting at, and I think I agree with you here, is that Penn State has been able to, I guess, be so fast in the right spots, like all over the field, especially that back 7, which hasn't, like in the last 2 weeks, hasn't played at its capabilities, but they still have got the turnover from Jalen Reed last week. They've gotten their hands on the football a couple of times. KJ Winston, of course, I'm always going to bring him up, has been in position to, get some pass breakups and things like that. But I think that what you're asking here is that Maryland, the way that they spread it out, the way that they'll throw from hash to opposite sideline opens the door for things like that. And I think that that's certainly an opportunity for Penn State this weekend to get their hands on the football. I think they have the advantage up front in terms of Maryland's offensive line is like it's kind of like Penn State, like when their first 5 are out there, they're fairly solid, but it's kind of also hanging on by a thread due to injuries and the fact that they're not very deep behind them. So I think Penn State's going to have opportunities to not dictate turnovers, but also, but in a sense, like kind of figure out when those big plays are presenting themselves to this defense.
That was kind of the thread, is like going a step further beyond just getting turnovers. Do you work it into your offensive formula of, we can not reasonably predict, but there's a chance we'll have 0.5 extra drives in this game. So like, does that change your idea of play calling, your mentality coming into the game? And obviously the answer is no. And that was the expected answer, but just the insight into how you view a volatile team going into it, I thought was an interesting perspective for Penn State, who is analytically based, but makes decisions from a football perspective based on that information. So it was, I agree. Yeah, you wish you could get 7 turnovers and like they get 0 points and 4 yards. But you live in the real world, and how much do they blend in analytics into their decision-making process?
Can we step back in that one for a second? Like, I think a lot of people are under the impression that Penn State just has an analytics book and reads the analytics book and goes with that. They're actually, like, compared to some of the teams they play, I don't want to say anti-analytics, but they go to the analytics, it seems like, a lot less than, I don't want to say typical team, but a lot of teams they play, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because it's like
I
very
think
hot button issue.
And it's also been like this, I think, is one of the areas where I've seen James Franklin kind of adapt over time, because I would say 5 years ago, maybe the whole go for it on 4th down, be aggressive, and the value of punting and turning the ball over that way. He was much more aggressive and much more, I think, by the book in certain areas, and has learned to pick his spots with that, and kind of has learned the downside of the analytics and you're not always going to be the percentage, right? That is a tapestry of every single 4th down and every single 4th down decision, and context does matter. Especially for you, the team that makes the decision. So I think that you've seen them actually shift to what you're saying is like, the information is there. It's a part of the conversation. It's part of the tool, but don't rely on that as a guarantee or as a solid thing, because it is variable, right? So just like turnovers are random, sometimes things happen that you can't control within that set of data. And I think you're right. That's a really interesting part of this conversation with James Franklin and his approach.
And it's become the easy crutch, right? Blame the analytics. Like there are choices being made here. And I say that very ironically, given that everything that he's done in the last couple of weeks has been questioned, but like, it's always blame the analytics, blame the coach, whatever. We're too deep into this one. Nate, I know you've got some perspective.
not on that. Dante Cephas, I thought that was the story. I mean, at least in terms of what was presented to us, right? The fact that we had not talked to him for the majority of the season, the fact that he was made available, and then obviously what James said about him taking strides, right? I mean, it's just been a process, I mean, I'm not sure how else to put it. I mean, it's just the notion that everyone is plug and play, and it doesn't matter, right, how much time you have or the ability to get up acclimated and up to speed. It's just not accurate. It's not real. So, the fact that Cephas was out there, certainly they felt comfortable enough to put him out there. I think it's a fairly strong indication of his soon to be expanded role, by two parts, right? By necessity, also by the fact that they feel, at least internally, that he's progressing somewhat. Right? I mean, I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure that it will ever match the broader conversation of what the expectations were. And so that's kind of this, you have this balance to play out of, okay, well, he was a top 15 guy in the transfer portal, or top, however, whatever the metrics were for him. And there were expectations that were attached to that just, they haven't materialized in terms of what he's being asked to do at Penn State. And so that was the thing to take away from what Franklin said was, it's different. He was like, I don't want to talk about his previous situation, meaning Penn State. Yeah. And he didn't have to do complex things. And so now these players are being asked to do something a little bit different in that receiver room. And you see it throughout the room, right? I mean, you see those things manifesting themselves, and it'll be interesting to see how he does given this kind of new opportunity.
Would you say that's kind of the story of Penn State's season so far, is just inflated expectations for the offense and five-star quarterback, running backs taking the next step, Dante Cephas as a number one transfer in the transfer portal, and then not meeting those off-season hype numbers from like a production standpoint?
I think yes and no. I mean, look, Drew is the elephant in the room, right? Is the quarterback had, he was Joe Montana before the season. And I'm not sure that was ever fair to him. And so now what he's doing and the way that he's performing is, it's flawed, as you would expect of a player of his experience, but good. And overall good, doing a lot of things that will help you win football games, and potentially, as you and I have talked multiple times this week, T. Frank, potentially getting better, right? Yeah. Potentially showing signs of, where this could go for him. So I mean, to me, it just feels like that's a big part of the root of this. But there's, as Franklin has said, and I agree with, the pieces around him have always needed to help him, right? That has always been the case, is plugging a guy into that situation. You need, Trevor Lawrence it's a good example and a bad example, right? But he had help. There were players around him that were spectacular. I think it is very fair to say that nobody offensively has been spectacular this season. Right. I mean, Keandre has been good. Nick has had moments, but not consistent enough. Katron has been good. Like, there has been a ton of good, but spectacular has just not been present from this offense this season. And so that's a little bit of what they're working with, right? Like, just where they are in their developmental process, and needing to kind of get better from within that.
I had Olu on the tip of my tongue, and then I realized you're talking about skill position players. Very different story. Absolutely.
Well, when we're talking about Penn State's offensive MVP being the left tackle, that's kind of the story, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's for sure.
And he's great. Like, that's not a slight on him. He's fantastic, but that's also a product of the rest of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, who would have thought that the two most consistent players on the team would be the tackles, given how Penn State fans felt about Caden Wallace coming into the season?
But
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just one more thing. Like, it's there has to be context to it, right? It is harder to be spectacular when everyone's expecting you to be spectacular, not just the fan base, but defenses. Every defense that Penn State has played this season has expected Nick and Katron to be spectacular and are preparing thusly. They are preparing accordingly. And so that makes it that much harder to be able to do and have some of the success that they had previously.
Night Raven back. Always love seeing him in the chat. He says, because I like unhinged people who cannot be contained, donating £5 to the channel. I love international. That just makes it more fun for us here on the show. Appreciate him being here. Appreciate everyone being here. Let's get into it. Let's talk about Penn State and Maryland. Guys, I'm going to start off with the theme of the show from me, and the theme of everything I kind of built this idea around is you could not have two more diametrically opposed styles of play between Talia Tungavaloa, a fiery, aggressive quarterback, and Drew Aller, a cool, calm, collected, for the most part, player who is refusing to do the wrong thing. So this, to me, and going back to my question to James Franklin yesterday about predicting turnovers, and to me, that's a huge part of this game. My analysis of this game and my prediction over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is entirely based on I can't predict if Penn State's going to get any turnovers, so to me, this looks like a close game. Fitz, I'm coming to you. From that perspective, do you think Penn State has the advantage of having the I don't want to call him conservative, but the careful quarterback, or are they at a disadvantage because Talia Tungavaloa could just go off at any point?
Yeah, I think that's the danger of this game, is to not be too careful on Penn State's side to be too careful on Penn State's side, and Maryland really not having a reason to be careful. Like they're embracing the role that they're in, and rightfully so. I mean, it's been the role for forever in this rivalry, but if you screw up, and maybe it's not a pick six or something like that, but if you screw up, you're going to get another opportunity, and they've got weapons to get it done. They've got good skill players. Like I said, the line should be an advantage for Penn State, but at the same time, they've got the guys that make it dangerous. Like maybe not in a 12-round match, but a couple of guys that could throw some haymakers in the first 3 rounds and really do some damage. And Maryland scored 14 points in the first quarter last week. Maryland has scored early in games. Penn State has not done that. And that's a situation where that could get a little dicey for Penn State. They go behind, or, they give up a play like they gave up last weekend. I mean, Maryland has more firepower to deal with what Penn State's going to throw at them than Indiana did last week. And we saw Indiana stick with Penn State.
I don't want to bring up something that happened in January, but it does have implications. Caden Prather, both teams wanted him. He goes to Maryland. Talk about the receiver room. A big win in the offseason. Does that, I don't want to say one-to-one equate to a big win on the field for Maryland, but I guess that's part of the conversation here is Maryland isn't a bad football team and has been going in certain areas toe-to-toe with Penn State. The transfer portal is a wild place. I'm not saying Penn State did anything wrong and they probably did everything they could to get Prather. But that particular situation, does that weigh in your mind as well when you're getting into this game?
Only when you take into account what Penn State's receiver room would have looked like with a guy like Prather. Prather was going to Maryland straight out of the portal. This is not a situation there was some contact with Penn State's people and Prather's people beforehand, but he went into the portal to go to Maryland, to go home. He's from Gaithersburg area, so he wanted to go home, and that was one that was essentially done before it got started. So I don't think there's much revisionist history there, but there's revisionist history because Caden Prather came to camp. You thought that he was going to Penn State, and then he went to West Virginia, and it just kind of this is a guy that Penn State fans always kind of penciled into that roster at some point. And then when he came back onto the scene, they thought, okay, maybe this is time to right the wrong of him going to West Virginia. Not calling it a wrong decision, you know what I mean?
Right, from a Penn State fan perspective.
From a Penn State fan perspective, and he goes to Maryland right away. But like I said, from talking to people at West Virginia, this was one that was done before it started, So
Gotcha.
There's really not much hindsight into that one other than kid's a really good player and Penn State could use him.
Yeah, that's good to know because I don't think that's a widely known or thought of perspective of it. That's how it played out. But, everyone who wants to have an arrow in the quiver will say, well, here's another miss by James Franklin and the receiver position. And why couldn't you get it done? And, when it is ready to play it out on the field, I think it is important to remember all those things. Nate,
it's Marvin Harrison coming out of St. Joe's Prep and going to Ohio State because he was never entertaining the thought of Friends don't let friends convince you that Marvin Harrison was a recruiting loss for Penn State, because it wasn't even on the board. It was like, we made some false equivalencies on the board this week. So I had to get that one in before we got too far away from the Ohio State game. That's kind of where I'm at with that. But Prather was like, some of these guys, they go into the portal and they've already got their apartment. That's kind of how
Right.
this one played out.
Nate, I want to come to you in a quick second, but we're right on the topic, and I want to get to this because this is a good thread of conversation. Regional recruiting. This is a big game. This big game for Maryland. Their season, I think their tickets are sold out, or their student tickets are sold out. I am very bad at reading the details in tweets, but that is something that it's clearly like between the two teams. Like, this is a big game for Maryland. How much does that factor into this weekend for you from a recruiting perspective? Is this another opportunity for Penn State, or is this one of those situations where it's just a big opportunity for Maryland and it is what it is for Penn State?
I think you addressed Nate, which it kind of threw me off here.
No, he's staying with you.
Yeah, I said I want to stay with you for a quick second.
I thought you said Nate, and I'm like, this is right up his alley, this recruiting thing. This is about, if you're Penn State, it's about squashing the bug. Like that, we talk about like how you've got opportunities if you're an upstart program, not an upstart program. Mike Loxley's been there for a while, but like there are certain advantages that Maryland has being closer to the cities. The population demographics, which makes it not easier to draw, but like there's more talent per capita in Maryland than there is in Pennsylvania. And that's just a product of like population demographics. But you have that opportunity to like sort of nip up at the big dog, and give recruits the opportunity to like see the vision. Like this is a vision game for them. This is always about beating Penn State. Penn State beating Maryland is about the next game. Maryland beating Penn State is about sort of making the season. That's why they always get Penn State always gets Maryland's best shot. So like this is a very big opportunity for them. And I don't know about the student tickets. I don't know about all the other stuff, but like this is a very big opportunity for them to showcase. It's why I think it was 2019 or when they went in there and canceled classes and did all that kind of stuff. Penn State blew them out. And that was just crushed the season given how Maryland started. So that is how Maryland views it. And Penn State has to keep that 1-0 mentality on the other side to view it as they do, which is retaining your spot at the top of this Northeast power structure in football. So I think that's kind of how you view it. And yeah, it's an opportunity. You don't want to lose any game, but you especially don't want to lose here. You don't want to lose to Rutgers. Those are the ones that turn into embarrassing losses.
Student tickets. I found the information I was looking for in my brain. Student tickets are sold out. So, that's indicative of the dichotomy between the two teams. Is that, student tickets sell out in 37 seconds, historically at Penn State, where Maryland, there's tickets available for this particular game leading into it. So, Nate, I guess with all of those context pieces put into place around it, give us your thoughts of the game and where you are starting with from the perspective of Penn State's positioning going into the game. A favorite, but I don't think anyone feels super confident in them to blow out Maryland.
Yeah. A couple of things. I think that Penn State's offense is what it is right now, and that expecting, I think there was something to build on from last week, but expecting a massive light bulb moment is probably unrealistic. Not probably, definitely unrealistic. Yeah. It's not going to like they're not going to go off for 63 points this weekend. So if you think to yourself, okay, they're good in the mid to high 20s, right? The dynamic is really about where's Penn State's defense. To me, is where's Penn State's defense, because Penn State's defense, I think, has played with everybody this season, right? It really has not been. It's been a very good year. It's an excellent defense. However, and this is getting into some juju to a certain extent, right? Is what's happened the last two games, right? You've got pass defenses and the back end of that defense at Penn State that has been, I'm not going to say exposed, but has had a little leaky, has had more losses on reps than they have had for most of the rest of the season combined, right?
Yeah.
What Marvin Harrison did for sure, but then also what Indiana did. And so I look at it as that those cornerback positions in particular are confidence positions, right? Like we have seen what happened to Daquan Hardy last year, having a ding to his confidence, right? What happens to those guys now in this situation against a very capable passing offense in those circumstances? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but I think that this is a game where if Maryland can get into high 20s, low 30s, Penn State's in trouble. Legitimately. Like, I think that's problematic for Penn State. It's just a matter of, where do you come out of the past two games? Are you energized and emboldened by the fact that you bounced back and overcame, what was undoubtedly a demoralizing loss to Ohio State? Sure, I think there are elements of that, but also I just wonder if they're asking some questions in the back of their minds right now about just how good they might be on that defensive side of the ball.
Let's talk about a little more juju Fitz. Drew Aller on the road has been decidedly worse than Drew Aller at home. The tape says that. The analytics say that. The good news is there's a floor. He does not, as we've seen all year, make terrible decisions. But how much are you thinking about that factoring into how you think the offense is going to perform on the road?
A lot. I mean, I'm not expecting them to go out and light it up or anything like that. I mean, it's probably a little bit more of the same. Be careful with the young quarterback, and that has been a detriment to what they've tried to do overall. You think you can run. I mean, play the tape here. You think you can run on blank. You think you can run on Maryland. I talked to somebody down in Maryland yesterday that's the concern there for the Maryland defense is that Penn State can run. Like, not so much that they've done it, but that's what Maryland presents them to. And it's funny to watch this entire schedule play out in, like, trends really haven't mattered that much. Like, you say, hey, they should be able to hit the big play against Northwestern. They didn't. Like, they should be able to run against Maryland. They very well may not. Like, that's kind of how, and I think that's where the frustration lies with the offense is, like, yes, things should be there. Like, and you saw Nick Singleton run for 1,000 yards last year. You saw Katron Allen play the way that he played last year. Like, you've seen glimpses of it, not this year, but you've seen it to tell you in your brain that should be what's happening. It just hasn't. I think that's the frustrating part. And then on top of that, like the false sense of security when you talk about averaging 41 points a game going into Ohio State, or the 30-point streak and things like that, is going to build that up in your mind. And then all of a sudden you look at this offense and, you're taking first half unders because they've been, really good for this, for this whole season. So not that I'm taking them, but that's just been what we've experienced. So you take the points away, you take the hope away. And I think that's been the string for the last couple of weeks.
Something that Nate and I were talking about on the message board, bring a brief part of the conversation out here to the show, is that the offense is built around the running backs. And the running backs, the idea that they would be appreciably better this year, unstoppable, I think is part of the conversation where they were going to take a step from what they were last year. And I looked at I did a side-by-side comparison for the first 8 weeks of the season, their first 8 games, shockingly similar in a lot of different areas. So that's a surprise that it's not that they got worse. And I think a lot of Penn State fans are saying Nick Singleton is bigger and slower and he's heavier. Is he injured? What's wrong? And it's like, he's the same. Like the numbers say from a production standpoint, he's the same. The way they've gone about getting those numbers is different. So Nate, I guess if the soul of the offense isn't working and the soul of the offense is not the quarterback, what? How did we get here? How did we get here?
So I just want to correct you on one thing, because I do think it's an important distinction. It's not that they were going to get better, although that was expected. It's that they're the best option that this team has. It's about putting it in context. It's not, oh, well, these guys are going to go from Superman to God, right? Like, that's not what we're talking about. It is, hey, we know or understand what the challenges are within the offense. Okay. You understand that. I mean, look, anybody that's acting surprised about the receiver situation right now, it just wasn't paying attention. That's the bottom line. This has been a conversation since December of last year. Everyone knew that this was coming. To a mixed degree, everyone knew. Well, I won't say that. A lot of people, or I at least, and maybe us here, expected this from Drew. Expected the reality of Drew. Not perfect, but also not bad. Just good, and having the opportunity to get better. And so they pointed out, I talked to Mike Yurcich before the Rose Bowl, and he was so direct about what was coming. And it like that whole perspective maintained through the spring into the summer. And I posted something on the message board last night. If you're a subscriber, you should absolutely check it out. It is Mike Yurcich in June detailing exactly what this offense is, which is controlling the game. That was their whole point, is control the game, get explosives as a result of what you represent in the running game.
Right.
Now, the running game explosives have not happened this year. That hurts the passing game explosives. The passing game explosives hurt the normal running game, right? Like it all.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like the what's that Always Sunny meme? Right.
With the all the details and the chalk outlines and stuff like that.
But that's what it is. That's what this is. And so they all work together, and that is why, to me, and again, like, I mean, you guys are so much smarter about football than I am, but I'm picking up on cues from James Franklin when he talks about Drew needing to beat teams over the top when this is the defense that they're presenting. That's for a reason. That has to happen. That ingredient has to be there occasionally to loosen up what you're going to get in terms of looks defensively. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting next 4 games for Penn State football.
So let's get to it. We have had a lengthy conversation about the offense, the defense. Let's put pen to paper, guys. Fitz, coming to you first. What was your score prediction for the game?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this. I wrote this one yesterday morning, but I have Penn State winning. Just talked to some people down there. Maryland's on a slide right now, and again, trends don't really matter that much with this one. But I got Penn State 30, Maryland 17. I actually went back in this morning to see if I could bring that Penn State point total down a little bit, just because you're not confident in the offense. Like, you're not confident in how it's going to look from week to week or from drive to drive. Really, I mean, third downs are so always important, but so massively important to playing the style of football that they want to do. And they haven't been good at it. So I think Penn State's going to do enough. I think it's probably going to be another frustrating game, but I think they're going to be able to do enough and maybe force a turnover here or there. I think Daquan Hardy is going to be a key player. Like, he's become the easy answer for the guy to look to as a potential key player, because he can make things happen on defense, special teams. And I think that the special teams will be, once again, a very big part of this. And Penn State's special teams, like, we don't really talk enough about how they've sort of stabilized over the last month or so. I wrote about Riley Thompson yesterday, and he's been very good. Like, it's really interesting to see that he is averaging, I think, 46 yards a punt in the last 4 games, but his long is only like 52 or 54. Like, sometimes you get a 70-yard roll, you get a roll that rolls out and fluffs that number a little bit. He has been consistently in there, and Penn State is, I believe, 26th in the country in net punt coverage. So, like, those little things are the things that add up. And then when you can add a spark in the return game, Nick had a good return. Daquan's had some good returns. I think that really helps you. Falcons has been pretty solid. Falcons, like, very close to hitting 250-yard field goals last week, and that was certainly not the book on him coming in. Like, his numbers at Columbia, very different, and he's a clean hold away from 250-yarders last week. So I think that's certainly something that comes into play. So those little things, the sudden change, the bringing it back on an interception, bringing it back with a punt return, things like that, are going to give Penn State the opportunity, because they're deeper. There's no question there that Penn State's deeper and more talented. It's just, can they get out of their own way on offense enough? And do we see another game where it's 10-10 at halftime, 14-14 at halftime? I think it's going to be close, and I think Penn State's going to have an opportunity to open it up, but it's going to take some going to take some splash. Going to take stop me if you've heard this one before. Going to take them making the extra play, and that's going to go on both sides of the ball this year or this week.
Nate, what about you?
Yeah, I hate making picks. I've got Penn State. I think 27-24. 27-26 sounds right. 28-27. I mean, I just feel like it's going to be close, and I feel like it screams that it's going to be close. Maryland, I didn't realize this. Maryland is 12th in the country in team sacks this season. That is problematic, I think, for Penn State. I mean, if anything has been demonstrated this season, it's that teams that can put pressure on Drew, teams that can muck up the line of scrimmage, have had quite a bit of success, kind of keeping things under control. Right. So I mean, I just, it's going to be, I don't know. I think that Penn State is going to have to, it can't just think it's going to walk in there and because they're on paper better, win this game. They are going to have to play to the level of Maryland for 60 minutes if they want to come out with a win. So I do think it's going to be close, and I think it's going to be fairly interesting to see how this team responds and how they execute. I mean, again, like, it's just execution. Just can you go out and do the things that you're called upon to do? We're going to see.
It's interesting you say that about Maryland. They don't have one guy that comes off the edge that is a problem. Like, they don't have a Chop Robinson, but they are deep of guys that get pressure, and they do, I think, a lot of things that Penn State struggles with at times, which is schemed up pressure, stunts and twists, and blitzing that can cause Penn State some problems. So I think that's a great shout by you, Nate, in a key matchup for this situation, going back to what Fitz said about third down. Now let's get into the questions from the Blue White Illustrated message board in today's BWI mailbag. Off the top, first question here. This is from The Renegade. Are we seeing noticeable improvement from Dante Cephas? Guys, have you seen noticeable improvement or improvement from Dante Cephas?
I've seen improvement, but probably not to the level of expectation. Like, I think that there's very different ways to go about this. Like, he's had some drops, but what concerns me the most is the mental speed of which he was playing the game was not number one where it needed to be with the physical speed, and then the physical speed suffered because of that. And I think he's getting a little bit more comfortable, and with that's going to come with reps and things like that. Got on the field for a lot last week. Number one, they're going to need it. Number two, is it enough? I don't know. Like, that's the question here. And you could probably say that about a lot of the receivers. I don't, like, people keep asking about the receiver rotation. I don't know the rhyme or reason. Yeah, obviously you get Malik McLean in there, who is Trey Wallace's backup after the injury. But, like, there's been really nothing that you can look at and say, this is why they did this, other than we don't see practice, and that's that's tough to swallow for a lot of people. Yeah.
Part of it is, how do you get Keandre Lambert-Smith to be in the best possible position to succeed? And to me, that's tough, because you had the plan of this is my read of the situation. Dante Cephas is your Z. That is your outside receiver to the field. Keandre Lambert-Smith in the slot. Trey Wallace is your X. And they don't have a lot of X receivers. They moved Dre from X to the slot, to the other side of the field. That's where he was last year. So how do you go about making up for that hole? Do you move him back to his old position? Do you move him to Z? What is Cephas comfortable with? Like, those are the questions that we need to have some answers to, is where is Cephas comfortable with? How do you get the most out of that other position? And do you trust Malik McLean? Because that's what we saw, was basically in game, we don't have a plan. Like, we're not set up to change this around right now. So it's just plug and play the next guy. And what you do between the weeks, I think, is going to be determined where they line up. Nate, let's go to you with this question. CB1994 wants to know, what is the biggest misconception about the Penn State program right now, either from the fans or the media, and why do you think it exists?
Oh, man. You don't You don't want me to talk about this, and we don't have enough time to talk about it. I think that the short version is college football is built for misery across all of its fan bases, and there is
Dabo,
no
is that you?
stand. What's that?
I said, Dabo, is that you?
It is. It me, Dabo. Look, I think it's real. I think it's real. I think that it is that if you go to an Ohio State site and look at how they're talking about their team, if Ryan Day does not win a national championship this year, they will want him to be fired. Fact, like true. That is a sentiment that exists at Ohio State. It's just a standard of perfect, right? I mean, and Franklin talked about it last week about how the things that make college football so great are like, you like the intensity, you want the stakes, you want all of that to be built in, but there has to be something other than winning a national championship that can be considered good for quote unquote blue blood programs. I'm not saying elite, I'm not saying great, but there has to be something that's good. And it doesn't feel like that exists in the sport at this point. And so until they go to it, like the thing that I'm fascinated by is the notion that everyone's just going to waltz into this 12-team playoff next year, as though that is, that's fine.
That's
right?
the solve.
And as though it's going to be easy to do so. No, it's going to be just as competitive. It's just that the competitiveness will, yes, the teams that are rolling and greased up and absolutely on a tear right now, that will continue in a lot of ways. But also the competitiveness of the middle has always been a very intriguing part of college football. It's not as though those, like, you might be able to differentiate those top 4 teams and say, okay, that those are the ones with the best chance of winning a national championship. And honestly, the argument has been made that only 3 teams most years really belong there. But there's still a meaty portion of the sport that has very good teams, flawed, but very good. And so I just, to me, that is the misconception of Penn State football, is that it's not a good program because it hasn't reached that level of success. It's a very good program. It is a borderline great program, great/excellent. It just hasn't been able to get over the top. And so until they do, I get it why people are frustrated, but also there has to be some level of perspective of saying, hey, this is also very good.
I want to bury deep underground the James Franklin quote of great to elite, but every time somebody says it, it pops into my head too. I'm tired of hearing it, but it's there. It's catchy.
I mean, is it us that put that out there? No, that was him. Like, you do it, you step in. I mean, Dabo made some points and then kind of, went off the rails a little bit and mentioned his marriage and kids and everything like that. But he's not wrong with the expectations versus the gratitude or whatever he was saying. I mean, he's not wrong about that. I think there's people in the chat that don't enjoy watching football anymore just because of the expectation of perfection.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've asked that philosophical question of, do you like football if you only care about 2 games a year and the rest make you hurt? Like, it's just painful when Penn State beats Indiana. And that was kind of to get into another question a little bit early. I'm going to space it out so we don't have so much denseness here in the middle. But yeah, that's James Franklin's point of, like, you beat Indiana, that's a win. This question for you, Fitz. Tin Man wants to know, who are the top 3 offensive tackles next year, and are they actually on the team right now?
You can go with Drew Shelton, Javin Williams. I think those are 2 of the top 3. Javin's going to have to come along and have a strong off season here. Of course, he came in January, was able to do some nice things, but like, he's obviously not at the level of the top 3 next year. I'm going to look in the portal. The OT is very hard to recruit in the portal. The good news for Penn State is that they're not bringing back a starter in name or whatever. Like, there's going to be, like, they're going to be able to show you that depth chart and show you that Olu's gone and Caden's gone. And those are 2 open spots. Now, offensive tackles are expensive. They're also never as good as you think they're going to be. I bring up a Johnny Cornelius at Oregon. Like, he came from Rhode Island and everybody offered him. And I think he was I think he's starting for them, but like, he's not the guy that he's not stepping in expecting to be Olu. Same thing with the guy like Blackstock, who was a target. He was a high level target for Penn State, went to Michigan State, was a second team left tackle. So transfers from whatever level, like those things are not guaranteed. So you're going to have to build it up on the home front. They like what Chimney's done so far. I don't think 2024 is the year for him, though they have taken him on some road trips, which is a good sign there. But yeah, offensive tackle continues to be a spot just because there's not a lot of them around. Like this is not an exclusive conversation to Penn State, but offensive tackle is a spot where you're always looking for more.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent breakdown. Nate, what's up?
JB's a swing guy too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could go with that, but like you're also, if Sal's not back, Norzad's not back. I mean, you're retooling a lot, but
yeah.
I guess I'm saying if
you're going
or
with the
two is
tackle,
absent, he's
okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, if you're going with the 3 tackle rotation where he's the 4th tackle this year or whatever, like I think that's certainly plausible. But yeah, you got to find something and continue to restock.
Next question, going back to you, Nate. Let's keep this one a little briefer. There's some other questions I want to get to, and we only have about 5 minutes. But James Franklin, his thoughts. What are your thoughts about Franklin's comments last night post-practice about mixed messages of being a student athlete, valuing education, the traditional Penn State values, versus winning at all costs? What was your thought on this that I asked you to save all of those nuggets for now?
I don't know. I can't do this. I can't do this that quickly.
Okay. Then
look,
give us your best. Give us your best. It's more important to get the best than it is to get something.
Here's my 30-second spiel on it. Every first day of classes in the fall, when Penn State students or Penn State football players tweet out that they're sitting in the front row of classes, everyone in the Penn State fan base goes absolutely bonkers for it. They love it. It's like the best thing in the world, which is fine. But that quickly dissipates, right? That attitude doesn't carry over once they get into the actual season. And so it's that there is a speaking out of both sides of your mouth to a certain extent in terms of what you value, right? Even James Franklin and how he's judged as a coach, you hear a lot of, oh, he's a good guy, runs a clean program, but whatever, blah, 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 right? It like literally that's the approach is blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
He can't win the big game. And so because he can't win the big game, he should be fired or whatever. More pressure. Fine. All of those things are fine. However, like there is an underside of how little trouble they've gotten in off the field. Like look, we deal with these guys all the time, right? Fitz, T. Frank. Is there a player that Penn State has put in front of the media over the last 5 years that we would be like, man, what a jerk, right? Like what a clown. We don't like this guy. No, not at all. Like overwhelmingly, the dudes in the Penn State football program as players are good humans, right? And so there's something to be said for that just gets very glossed over by the very same people who are absolutely over the moon at seeing that first day class picture. Right. Yeah. It's just a little bit hypocritical. But I get it. I mean, like I said, college football is a miserable culture, right? In terms of its fandom, the fandom, it gravitates toward negativity that I feel like other than like when Minnesota was good in 2019, that was a reason for that fan base to be overjoyed when you exceed expectations. But once expectations are so high, there's nowhere to go.
Nate, I want to just point this out because I just had this conversation in the chat. One of our regulars here, and I just want this to be fair. Like you're allowed to say what you want in the chat. I have very loose, as long as you're not being overly negative and ruining everyone's time. But Julius Seizure here has been one of the biggest negativity, like kind of troll borderline guys in the chat. And I just like, you're a huge bummer, but that's to your point, Nate, of like, that's...
Yeah, but he likes me, so that's okay. He said I'm the goat.
But that's
I don't mind it. Keep going, Julius.
Right. No, I'm not trying to discourage his opinion. I'm just saying, like, it's a bummer when you're like when you're bringing up the negative option in all of these situations. But to your point, that's college football. That's what you've been treated to the whole time because everyone but one person fails, and the opportunity for success is like in the single percentage points for most programs. I think that's a fair example, and I think that's a fair conversation to have about all of this. Want to get to a couple more conversations here very quickly before the end of the show, and I always do this where it's like, oh yeah, we got like blah, 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 and then we go like 5 minutes too long. But I want to do this last question about the receivers buttoning up the game coming up. Which receiver with 5 catches or fewer so far this season has the best shot to make an impact down the stretch? Fitz, what's your thought on a reserve receiver stepping up, assuming Trey Wallace is out for an extended period of time?
Yikes, that's a tough question. I don't have the stats in front of me to see which ones have 5 catches or fewer.
Just generally a depth guy that you think can contribute.
I mean, maybe Cade. Like I thought it would be Liam, but he didn't play last game, which is not great. Yeah. Caden had the touchdown against Ohio State, which I think probably sold people a little bit too much in terms of his progress, in terms of where he's at in the general scheme of things. So like, I think that they, certainly still have potential, but it's tough. I mean, if you read our stuff about the young receivers on the site, I believe it was last week, it was a sobering moment there. So I don't know. I would like to see McLean involved, but like he's disappeared as well. I wish I had an answer, but like, you can shoot holes in any name that you bring up just because they haven't done it and haven't shown it.
Yeah, I think Caden is a good option too, given where you might have to line up Keandre. Nate, go for it.
Just real quick, something that I thought was fairly funny from James Franklin on Tuesday when he was talking about the receiver, right? It was like the rotation of receivers, the depth of the receivers. We just haven't seen that, and he was like, hey, who knows? Well, one, he was like, you guys don't see practice. And then he was like, who knows? Maybe they'll go out and they'll have a breakout game and it'll be spectacular. And you'll come in here and you'll be talking about that guy and we'll be talking about him and it'll be great. He's like, I really hope that happens. With what's the backside of that? The message is we've never seen this in practice. Like it doesn't exist. And so if it doesn't exist in practice, this notion that it's somehow going to transform into something that exists in a game, it's just like, that's why he keeps saying I try to maintain that balance where I'm saying the right things publicly while putting pressure on them privately, but also not ticking anybody off publicly. Like you just can't say those things. You can't do that or you alienate your team. So it was just kind of funny to me. Like, where's Caden Saunders is a big part of the conversation. Where's Omaria? Like, where are they? They're at practice, not getting to the level that Penn State expects for them to be the best option that they want to go to at receiver. Not right now, right? Doesn't mean that it can't come for them. It can, but it's just not there for them right this second.
Nate, we're coming right back to you. Final thoughts. Take us out.
Final thoughts is I think that this is a massive game for Penn State. That is my final thought. Is this game is huge in so many reasons. It is huge for the stat talked about last week about 8 years of losing the first or second game after the first loss of the season. It is huge for just Maryland, right? And what that relationship means in the conference. It is huge for Penn State to be able to get into Michigan next week and stay as a relevant team. But this season can swing wildly based on what happens in this game on Saturday.
Fitz, what do you got for us? For real though, take us out.
For real? No, I mean, I do think, it's a huge key game. And this is a situation that I think this is a momentum game in terms of like down to down, drive to drive. And I think Maryland has the opportunity to score points, to throw the ball around a little bit and have some success in cracking this defense. I don't think they're like a good team. Like that's kind of where I'm at with them. I don't think they're a good team, but they do have some guys that can break some things. So that's dangerous. Penn State's defense, of course, has to, number one, make up for the loss of Chop Robinson. Not having Chop Robinson is going to be something that comes up. Adisa, denies Zariah, if Amin can go, then those are obviously big. Zane Durant, I think, is very big this week, and a guy like Daquan Hardy, I think, can be big this week. So I think Penn State has the ability to get it done, absolutely, but it's certainly, I don't expect that to be an easy one.
We'll wrap up the week tomorrow, 10 a.m., 5 things I'm looking for. Going to be grinding some film this afternoon to bring up some interesting points to talk about. These guys have covered all of the good stuff, though. So Please join us tomorrow. Join us on the Tailgate Show. 12:30 is the kickoff time for that. Myself and Aeneas Hawkins are going to be talking about the game, giving you a good preview of what's going to come up later in the day. And as always, thank you, subscribe, etc., etc. We will talk to you later.